Hello, YouTube. It's Mr. Blandis. I'm going to talk briefly about world building and writing thereof. I am the author, for those who don't know, author of, excuse me, quite rude of me, Devour Blood and Steel. And this book is a standalone novel. There are others that will be associated with this character. I will be talking, in fact, if you stick to the end, I'll tell you a little bit my other one. How about that? There we go. Let's do that. So, the word building I want to talk about is, they say you have to write all the time. Whenever you feel like it, write it. Or whatnot. Generally, this is the way my mind works. Is if I have an inspiration about something, I'm lucky enough to where my mind actually holds on to the information to the point where I can rework it in my mind and then come back to it later and write it down. Hence, me having 5 notebooks full of information that the actual reader would never see. And there's also stories from those that I can pull from to actually create future books. That's the whole purpose about world building, is you create a base that you can pull from to create your fantasy world or your modern world or your world events. Okay. So for me, I have several of these books, and there's stories written in them. Stories that my readers will never see unless I actually put it together and publish it. So the whole purpose of having a world building type Bible, encyclopedia, whatnot, is for the author, co-author, or ghostwriter can actually look back into and be part of the canon. And some of you may know this, some of you may not know this or understand it, but it's this is how I operate. So whenever I get an idea, I create a name or several names. I think of what is going on in this short story, backstory, and I write it out. Like one particular one that I really like, it's the War of Attrition between the Northern Elves and the Southern Elves. The Kingdom of Eldoria and their allies, their city-state allies, are at war with the southern part, Slada and their city-states and their allies. And so it's a war of attrition, meaning there really isn't a full-on called out declaration of war. So if you want to compare that to something, Vietnam was not a full-out war, even though there was a lot of fighting. But Congress never called it a war, declared it to be. It was a police action. So with this war of attrition, that's how it's labeled in my timeline, there is a battle between the North and the South at a city called Bollister. And there, the king of Meldoria did not support sending troops, but different clans associated with the king sent their sons, sent their cousins, sent their bodyguard down to the city to occupy it because they heard of a new religion, the sect of Corel, was trying to overtake it. And the sect of Corel was supported by the kings of the city-states of Slada. So they sent their nobles unofficially up there to counteract the action of the North, because they wanted to protect the priests, as well as a human kingdom called the Kingdom of Mordis. Now, this kingdom is predominantly human, and they're real close allies with the Immortals. The Immortals are cursed people. I can explain that in another video if you guys like. I'll go more in depth with that if you want. But the Kingdom of Mordis sent troops there because of their nephew being killed, the king's nephew. And he wanted to have revenge. So, that's how that built up. I have a whole story written about that. The reader may never read that, but it's something that happened in my world's history. So you create these little nuggets about your world. Make sure they're in a timeline that your characters can refer back to, or that you can build off of. Say your characters go to a ruins, and in this ruins is, say, a dead king. You cannot explain anything about that dead king if you don't have the information already made. So if your character goes and just happens to find a magical sword there, just for magical reasons, it doesn't really hold water because there's no real reason why that magical sword would be there in the first place. Say you're change it around. Say a king who was blessed by the dragons dies at the ripe age of 347. His vast kingdom falls apart, and he is buried and entombed with his loved ones and his entourage, including his armor, weapons, and his magical sword. See, now there's a little history there. So that's what you want to keep in mind when you're actually creating world building, is there has to be a reason why that's there in the first place. If there's a ruined castle in the middle of a swamp or a marsh, why is that there? What happened? What caused it to be there? That's all part of world building. You cannot just say, oh, it's there just because it's there, because then your story will feel flat, not well rounded. Okay, so that's enough of that. I've gone on 7 minutes so far. Hopefully you guys stayed to the end, because I'm going to give you a little taste of what I'm doing with Ivar. So if you guys don't want to hear this and you want to wait till the book comes out, hopefully it comes out in July, then you can click off, and thanks for watching. But Ivar is sent off on a mission. He is to eliminate certain people in town. So this town, in this story that I'm creating for him, he is going to experience intense hatred towards kings and towards, I'm trying to be vague, but he's going to end up having to go down a darker path than he really wanted. He's going to allow the voice in his head to overtake his body more often, and he's going to allow the dark magic to overtake him more. He's going to fight vampires and undead creatures and do the bidding of Malenka. You'll find out who Malenka is. He's the god of the grave. But he will go through this trial of figuring out who he wants to be. And at the end of the story, I will bring him out of it to where he starts counteracting the orders of the Red Horde. The Red Horde are the people who have enslaved his people, and he wants to break free. So, that's a little bit of that. I will hopefully get that done by July. Fingers crossed. If you guys stayed this long in my story rant, sorry for my head being cut off. I've lost my stand for my phone, and I have to go down and buy a new one. So please forgive the amateurish of this video. I do appreciate you guys staying this long, and please like and subscribe. It does help me a lot. If you guys also want to support me more often, hopefully. You guys can head over to Buy Me a Coffee. I'll put a link and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, thank you for watching. And as always, guys, stay being creative.